morning, and welcome to Tuesdays with the Pilgrim. Today we begin our final chapter of Pilgrims Progress, chapter 36, with Arrival in the Land of Beulah. And this has been quite a journey we've had together, and I hope you won't despair thinking that this is the end, because next Tuesday, Tuesdays with the Pilgrim will continue with a new story. We'll be looking at Charles M. Sheldon's In His Steps. But let's conclude Pilgrim's Progress. After this I watched until they had come into the land of Beulah, where the sun shines night and day. Once they arrived, being quite weary, they decided to rest for a while. This country was commonly traveled by pilgrims, and because all of the orchards and vineyards here belonged to the king of the celestial country, his pilgrims were allowed to freely partake of anything of his that their hearts desired. It took only a short time for them to feel rested and refreshed. Even though there were bells ringing and trumpets playing melodiously, making it impossible for them to sleep, they still felt tremendously renewed, as if they had never before slept so soundly. The continual talk of those who walked the streets here sounded like this: "More pilgrims have come to town. Many passed through the water and were let into the golden gates today." Then someone would exclaim, "Here comes a legion of shining ones into town. That tells us that there are more pilgrims on the road, for the shining ones have come here to wait for them and to comfort them after all the sorrow they have experienced on the way." Then the pilgrims got up and walked back and forth, enjoying everything. Their ears were filled with heavenly music, and their eyes were delighted with celestial visions. There was absolutely nothing here in this land that was offensive to their ears, their eyes, or their sense of touch or smell or of taste. Nothing that was at all offensive to body, mind, or spirit. It was only when they tasted water from the river through which they were to pass that they thought it tasted somewhat bitter, but even that proved sweeter once it was down. There was a record kept here of all the pilgrims of old, and it included all the famous acts that they had done. The ebb and flow of the river was much talked about here too. It seemed that some had been able to cross it when it was nearly dry, while others were forced to cross it when it had overflowed its banks. The children of the town would go into the king's gardens and gather bouquets for the pilgrims, and bring them to them with sincere affection. Henna, spikenard, saffron, calamus, and cinnamon grew here, and there were also trees of frankincense, myrrh, and aloes, and all the best spices. These wonderful fragrances and spices were used to perfume the bedrooms during their stay here, and with them also their bodies were anointed in preparation for their crossing of the river when the appointed time had come. Chapter 36, Part 2. A messenger visits Christiana. Now as they rested here, waiting for their hour to come, a messenger from the celestial city came into town, creating a great deal of excitement. He carried something of great importance for one called Christiana, the wife of Christian the pilgrim. After inquiring about her, he found the house where she was staying, and he presented her with a letter, the contents of which said, "Greetings, good woman. I bring you news that the Master is calling for you, and expects you to stand in his presence, clothed in immortality, within the next 10 days. After the messenger had read the letter to her, he gave her a token to assure her that he was a true messenger, and that he had come to instruct her to make preparations to leave. The token was an arrow with a point sharpened with love that easily found its way into her heart. It so worked in her that by the appointed time nothing could restrain her from going." When Christiana saw that her time had come, and that she would be the first of her companions to cross over the river, she called for Greatheart, her guide, and told him what was happening. He told her that he was genuinely happy to hear the news, and that he would have rejoiced also had the messenger come for him. Then she asked him to advise her on all the preparation she should make for her journey. So he told her what to do and what to expect on her journey, and then he assured her that the rest of them would accompany her to the riverside. After this she called for her children and gave them her blessing. She told them that it was a comfort that she could still read the mark that was set in each of their foreheads. She said that she was so glad to see them with her there, and also so happy that they had kept their garments so white. Last of all, she bequeathed to the poor what she had, and admonished her sons and daughters to be ready for the messenger when he came for them. After she had finished talking to her guide and her children, she called for Valiant for Truth and said to him, "Sir, you have shown yourself in every place we have been to have a very true heart. My king says, be faithful even to the point of death, and I will give you the crown of life. I would also request that you keep an eye on my children, and if at any time you see any of them weaken, please speak encouragingly to them, for they have been faithful, and the promise will be fulfilled for them when they reach their end." She gave Standfast a ring, and then called for old Mr. Honest. She said to him, "Here is a true Israelite in whom there is nothing false." Then he said, "I wish you a pleasant day when you set out for Mount Zion, and I will rejoice if I see that you are able to cross the river with dry shoes on your feet." "Whether wet or dry, I long to be gone," she replied, "for no matter how the weather is in my journey, once I reach my destination, I will have enough time to sit down and rest and dry myself off." Then that good man, ready to halt, came in to see her. "Your journey here has been difficult," she said, "but that will only serve to make your rest even sweeter. Therefore watch and be ready, for the messenger may come for you an hour that you don't expect." After him, Despondency and his daughter, much afraid, came to see her. Christiana said to them, "You should always remember to be thankful for the deliverance you have received from Doubting Castle and the hands of Giant Despair. The result of that mercy is that you have been brought here safely. Be watchful and cast off all fear. Be sober and keep your hope until the end." Then she said to Feeble-mind, "You were delivered from the mouth of Giant Slaygood, so that you might live in the light of the living forever, and see your king in everlasting peace and consolation. Before he sends for you, however, I would advise you to repent of your tendency to be afraid and to doubt his goodness. If not, this fault could cause you embarrassment when you stand before him." Chapter 36, Part 3, Christiana's Departure. Now the day for her departure had finally arrived. The road was full of people who wanted to see her off on her final journey. But what a surprise to see all the banks beyond the river filled with horses and chariots. They had come down from above to accompany her to the city gate. So she went ahead and entered the river, and with a wave goodbye to those who had followed her to the riverside, she was gone. The last word anyone heard her say was, "Lord, I am coming to be with you and to bless you." So her children and friends returned to their places, for those who had waited for Christiana on the other side had carried her out of their sight. When she called at the gate and it was opened to her, she entered with all the joyful celebrations that her husband Christian had experienced. Her children wept at her departure, but Greatheart and Valiant for Truth played joyfully on the harp and cymbal. So all departed to go to their respective places. Chapter 36, Part 4, Ready to Halt's Departure. In time, a messenger came to town again. This time his business was with Ready to Halt. He found him and said, "I have come to you in the name of him whom you have loved and followed, even though on crutches. My message is to tell you that he expects you at his table to dine with him in his kingdom on the day after Easter. Therefore prepare yourself for this journey." Then he gave him a token to guarantee that this message was true, and he said, "I have severed your golden cord and broken your golden bowl." After this, Ready to Halt sent for his fellow pilgrims and said, "I have been sent for, and God will surely visit you also." He wanted Valiant for Truth to make out his will. Having nothing to bequeath to those who would survive him except for his crutches and his best wishes, he said, "I bequeath these crutches to my son, with 100 warm wishes that he will walk in my footsteps better than I have done." Then after thanking Greatheart for all his guidance and kindness, he left for his journey. When he came to the edge of the river, he said, "Now I will no longer need these crutches, since there are chariots and horses waiting across the river for me to ride on." The last words he was heard to say were, "Welcome, life!" So he went his way. Chapter 36, Part 5. Feeblemind's Departure. After this, Feeblemind heard the sound of the messenger's trumpet at his bedroom door. The messenger came in and said, "I have come to tell you that the master needs you, and that in a very short time you will see his face in splendor. Take this token of the truth of my message. Those looking through the windows grow dim." Then Feeblemind called for his friends and told them the message he had received. He said, "Since I have nothing to bequeath to any, what reason would there be in my leaving a will? As for my faint heart, I will leave that behind me. I will have no need of it in the place where I am going, nor is it worth bestowing on the poorest of pilgrims. Therefore, when I am gone, I desire that you, valiant for truth, would bury it in a garbage dump." This having been done, the day came in which he was to depart. He entered the river, as had the others. His last words were, "Hold out faith and patience." So he went over to the other side. After many days, a messenger came for Despondency, bringing him this word, "Trembling man, you are summoned to be ready to see your king by the next Lord's Day, to shout for joy for the deliverance you have received from all your doubts." Then the messenger said, "To prove my message is true, take this for a proof." The grasshopper drags himself along. Chapter 36, Part 6. Despondency and Much Afraid's Departure. When Despondency's daughter, Much Afraid, heard what had been done, she knew it was her time to go also. Then Despondency said to his friends, "You know in what condition my daughter and I have been, and in what a troublesome manner we have behaved ourselves all along the way. Our will is that our depressions and slavish fears will never be received by anyone, from the day of our departure and forever. For I very well know that after our death they will offer themselves to others. To be frank with you, they are spirits which we entertained when we first began to be pilgrims, and could never shake them thereafter. They will walk about and seek to find other pilgrims who will receive them, but for our sakes keep the doors shut to them. When the time had come for them to depart, they went to the river bank. The last words of Despondency were, "Farewell, night, welcome day." His daughter went through the river singing, but no one could understand the words of her song. Chapter 36, Part 7. Mr. Honest's Departure. Then after a while it came to pass that a messenger was in town inquiring for Mr. Honest. So he came to the house where Mr. Honest was staying, and he delivered these lines into his hand. "You are commanded to be ready within 1 week to present yourself before the Lord at his Father's house. And here is a token that my message is true." And all the daughters of music are brought low. So Mr. Honest sent for his friends and said to them, "I will die, but will not make a will. As for my honesty, it will go with me. Let those who come after be told this." When the day that he was to depart had come, he set out to go across the river. At that time the river was overflowing its bank in some places, but Mr. Honest in his lifetime had asked a man named Good Conscience to come and meet him there. Good Conscience was there and lent him a hand, helping him over. The last words of Mr. Honest were, "Grace reigns." And so he left this world. Chapter 36, Part 8. Valiant for Truth's Departure. After this there was much talk in town that Valiant for Truth had been given a summons by the same messenger who had come for the others. He had been given this token that the summons was true. "Your pitcher is shattered at the spring." When he understood it, he called for his friends and told them about it. Then he said, "I am going to my father's, and though I have come this far with great difficulty, I do not regret any of it. I give my sword to the one who will succeed me in my pilgrimage. I give my courage and skill to the one who can take it. My marks and scars I will carry with me to be a witness for me that I have fought the battles of the one who will now be my rewarder." When the day had come that he must go on, many accompanied him to the riverside. As he went in, he said, "Where, O death, is your victory?" And as he went down deeper, he said, "Where, O death, is your sting?" So he went on over, and all the trumpets sounded for him on the other side. Chapter 36, Part 9. Standfast's departure. Then there came a summons for Standfast. He is the one that the rest of the pilgrims had found upon his knees in the enchanted ground. The messenger brought it to him in his open hands. The content of the message was that he must prepare for a change of life, for his master was not willing that he should be so far away from him any longer. Standfast wondered deeply at this, and the messenger said, "No, you don't need to doubt the truth of my message, for here is a token of the truth of it. The wheel is broken at the well." Standfast called for Greatheart, who had been their guide, and said to him, "Sir, although it was not my good fortune to have been in your company for long during the time of my pilgrimage, yet since the time I met you, you have been helpful to me. When I came from home, I left behind me a wife and 5 small children. I know that you will go and return to your master's house, in hopes that you may yet be a guide to more of the holy pilgrims. So please, I beg you, when you return, please send for my family and tell them all that has happened to me. In addition, tell them about my happy arrival at this place and of the blessed state that I have more recently come to. Tell them about Christian and about Christiana, his wife, how she and her children came after he did. Tell them of the happy ending she came to and where she has gone. I have little or nothing to send to my family, unless it is my prayers and tears for them. And that will be enough if you are able to share these things with them and get them started out on the way." Chapter 36, Part 10. Standfast's final words. When Standfast had finished putting his things in order, his time of departure came. A great calm had come over the river at the time that he came to it, and when he was about halfway in, he stood for a while and talked to his companions that were still on the bank. He said, "This river has been a terror to many. Yes, the thought of it has often frightened me, too. But now I see that I am standing easily. I am standing on the same thing that the priests who bore the Ark of the Covenant stood on while Israel went over this Jordan. The waters are indeed bitter to the palate and cold to the stomach, yet the thought of what I am doing and the glorious escorts that await me on the other side warms my heart like a glowing coal. I now see myself at my journey's end. My days of toil are over. I am going now to see that head that was crowned with thorns, and that face that was spit upon for me. I have formerly lived by hearing and by faith, but now I am going where I will live by sight, and will be with him in whose company I delight. I have always loved to hear my Lord spoken of, and whenever I have seen the print of his shoe on the earth, I have desired to set my foot to it. His name has been to me as priceless as treasure, sweeter than all perfumes. His voice has been music to my ears, and I have more earnestly desired to see his face than those who would most desire to see the light of the sun. I have gathered his word which became my food, and used it as a remedy against fainting along the way. He has held my course steady, and I have forsaken all my sins. Yes, he has strengthened my steps in his way." Now while he was talking to them, his countenance changed, and after saying, "Take me, for I have come to you," he was gone, and he ceased to be seen by them. Chapter 36, Part 11. The Joy that Awaits Us. Oh, how glorious it was to be able to see there beyond the river and in the upper regions the vast numbers of horses and chariots, with trumpeters and flautists and singers and musicians playing stringed instruments, all present to welcome the pilgrims as they crossed the river, following one another to enter that beautiful gate of the city. As for Christiana's 4 sons and their wives and children, I did not stay long enough to see them over. I did, however, hear that after I left they were still alive, building up the church in the place where they were left for a time. Should I have cause to go that way again, I may give those who desire it an account of what I have left out of the story. In the meantime, to my reader, I say farewell. Well, thank you for journeying together with me on this lovely walk as we read together and enjoyed Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, written in the late 1600s. I'm hoping you enjoyed it, and if you want to go back and start at the beginning, there is a playlist on this channel for Tuesdays with the Pilgrim. There will be a new playlist starting for In His Steps, starting next Tuesday, and I pray that you'll join me then. Until then, take care, stay safe, and God bless.